And now for that, we need to actually look at how it is important for us to also look at different measures of compiling or getting such information from the grassroots. So it's not only that the organization should be looking into it. And what I'm trying to share here is basically my own experiences of how we faltered in many places and how we actually tried to address the issue when we were trying to work on certain aspects in the field. So I think I would stop here, and maybe if needed, I would come back again. Thank you once again, NIDM and WFP.
Thank you, Mr. Prasad. And I think one of the things that I really would like to underline from what you said is that a lot of experiences that are organically evolved from the community, they need to be kind of shared more widely, and coming back from scale to scale, as to use your words, is an interesting input. And I just wanted to understand, as a follow-up question, really, is when you look at the way the proposal that have been shaped, I mean, what could be the possible challenges that you see for a grassroots organization to, pitch for something like this? Because some of them, we hope, are listening, and they would really benefit from your candid advice. Over to you, just as a follow-up, Mr. Prasad.
Okay. I think the biggest challenge is basically to articulate the work that they have done. If articulation, and I'm not saying that they lack the articulation, it's about the articulation that we expect people to provide to us. So there is a difference. So I think what is required actually is if there are groups that want to contribute or would like to get their work featured here, or they would like to, submit their about their initiative, then there must be some way in which kind of a hand holding is required to actually get them to write it. Because I know, when you are in the field, it is easy to much comfortable for the team to work at the field than to do the documentations, because that takes a lot of time, and resources as such is not that easily available for all this work. So I think what I would rather suggest here is we need to recognize the fact that it is important that people are it is important for us to take into notice that these are challenges that the organizations have in terms of articulations, and see if there is a way possible in terms of helping them out in articulating it the way they do. Because many a times a help actually helps also in a way of deriving the points that you want to say. A third party coming in, or any help coming in, would actually help structure the whole thought. So I think at this moment, looking at the proposal and the potential submissions, I would say this is, as far as the grassroots are concerned, this is one of the biggest challenges.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Prasad. One quick question: have you applied for it yet?
I've already told Animesh I will be.
Good. Look forward to receiving your application.
Yes.
And because as you rightly said, the opportunities that are there and the solutions that you're already kind of seeding and working on, they need to connect. So just to move on to the next participant, really, Ms. Shivani, you come from the humanitarian sector, and we've seen that you've done work on food relief assistance and various other things. From your point of view, some of the areas that you've already worked on, primarily food relief and assistance, because it's increasingly emerging as an area that civil society needs more capacity on. The COVID pandemic was a clear kind of indication in that direction. What are the few areas where you think that the sector can improve on, primarily from food relief assistance or food security being embedded into the the disaster or climate resilience response? And in this context, how do you see the relevance of NIDM's effort on mainstreaming FNS, in emergency preparedness and response. Over to you.
Thank you, Parvinder. Yeah, thank you. And hello, everyone. Very delighted to receive this opportunity to share my experiences and thoughts on addressing the food security and nutrition from humanitarian response and disaster preparedness perspective. As you all know, the most marginalized and vulnerable communities who are affected by climate-induced disasters, it's not that they just get affected like once or twice in 4 years or 5 years. I think it's now every year's phenomena, or every 2 or 3 months there is a new disaster which is hitting these communities. And I would say that these communities are the least prepared at the stage who are in the last line, given their vulnerabilities and other marginalized conditions. Multiple disasters which are hitting these areas are making their life and livelihood conditions very worse, impacting their basic food security. And if you see in last few years, as you all correctly mentioned, Parvinder, we have worked with those communities to address their needs in terms of providing food and cash assistance for purchasing their basic food items, which has been really useful as it has come out from our post-distribution monitoring systems that we follow. It's not only providing the basic food facilities or the cash assistance in which people just can buy those needy items at the household level, but it also gives them an ownership to purchase those items as per their need and the availability. Let's take an example like what happened in the disaster. The local government authorities, when they provide the food packages, sometimes people what they receive is only rice, dal, and the flour. Then this gives them a kind of opportunity to purchase the other nutritional items like spices, oil, and other things, which can really complement their food packages. I won't say that it happens in all the disasters, but most of the time it happens that we have somehow faced on the ground. I feel under this food security sector, what we need is mainly, I think, some more guidance from the sector specialist in the country. For example, do we know that what is the standard food package that will meet the minimum standard for each state? And whenever there is an emergency, let's say, all of our humanitarian agencies, what we do, we have our own calculation system for, to get the minimum expenditure food basket. What will be the amount and how much cash we should, inject during our responses. But I think that something is one of the area where we really feel that if it is readily available in the sector, if it is readily available by the expert agencies and the sector specialists at the country level for different states, that this will be the food package which will meet the needs of communities in different states. I think that's going to be really, really helpful. And also it also goes with the same like nutritional package guidance. We are not sure if it is available or maybe we are not aware of it. If it is, that's something we would be really happy to know from you. This is one area, and I feel one of the other area which needs more attention, apart from the humanitarian response, is emergency preparedness and coordination. For example, are we getting any early warning regarding food insecurity situations in India, looking into the climate change crises which are occurring like day by day? You all have seen that these days the states which are prone to drought are now getting flooded by the unprecedented rains, and areas which used to get rains and they are somehow getting now there is a drought-like situation in those areas. So looking in such scenarios, do we have an early warning system? And second thing is, if we have such system in which we receive the information about, this is going to be the food insecurity situation in a couple of states, with that it will really help humanitarian sector to plan their interventions. So that if we can have regular food security assessments and advanced warnings coming to the agencies, that will really help our intervention preparing in terms of preparedness for the upcoming disasters. And your last question, Parvinder, with regard to where NIDM and maybe WFP can also, your efforts can really help and benefit the civil society, is it would really benefit if a national level, some national level sector coordination system can be activated, and if they can review the situation periodically, where NGOs can also participate, they can also contribute. This will actually help to increase the technical capacities of the partners, humanitarian partners on ground, and improve overall preparedness and coordination in emergencies. That's something I feel will be really helpful if NIDM can support and look into this areas. One is the early warning system have based on the food security assessments, and second is to have a proper coordination system set up with the government and the non-government organizations or other organizations who are integrated into such area. I think that's it, Parvinder. That's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Shivani, for a really detailed and pointed kind of presentation. And you rightly pointed out that some of the aspiration really for this challenge is that the ideas like the one you just shared about mapping the vulnerability, real-time mapping of vulnerability of food insecurity as it evolves, whether it's because of the seasonality, the climate change, or vulnerability to pandemic, because we've realized it almost responds in the same way. Right? It is something that can come from a private sector. It's already being worked upon by WFP along with the government, but it's also something that many other stakeholders can seed and take it forward. So thank you so much for that input. And I had a follow-up question, but I think you kind of addressed it, which was, what would be your advice to the humanitarian sector to participate in this initiative? But you would still like to take a crack at it, it would be great. I mean, if you were speaking from your experience to the humanitarian sector, to your partners, what would you say to them to get them excited about participating in this initiative?
Yeah, one of the thing is, Parvinder, it's not about having a setup at the national level, but I would really say that working with those agencies, with those local partners who are on ground, who are working directly with communities, I think a level of coordination, if that can be set up at that level, at the district level or the state level, would really be benefiting. Because having a coordination system at national level is one of the things, but another approach of working at the grassroots level with communities, and if we really encourage our partners to be part of such sectors or such coordination meetings or platforms at their level, that would be really, and they'll be interesting, because these are the people who can really share the real-time scenario, the real-time situations on ground. Especially when let's mention about the assessments. I mean, we can't do anything without their support at the community level. So these are the agencies that we really need to encourage them on ground, that how they can be really actively be part of such assessments and studies. I think that's something I would really say that even NIDM and WFP can also really focus upon. Maybe we can just work in collaboration and see that how best we can achieve this, not the bottom-down approach.
Thank you so much, Shivani ji. And there are some questions that you might be kind of excited about answering. I can see that in the chat. So please hold on. And I'll now move to Mr. Sood, Vikram Sood, basically to the private sector, a very important stakeholder. And basically, my question is that yours is the first application that came into the challenge, right? I mean, that's what I get to hear. You were the first applicant, and it's very exciting because, to be honest, a lot of it, not that we had an expectation that the private sector won't be proactive on this, but the expectation normally was that a response from the civil society and institutions and stakeholders who are working on humanitarian food security issues would come in. But yours was the first one. So, just wanted to use your kind of interest and your proactiveness as an example for others who are there in this call and yet not decided, and they're on the fence and making a decision to apply for it. I think, we'd like to know what were your thoughts on how social entrepreneurs really can, play a role in improving capacities in food security and nutritional securities, especially in relation to emergencies or otherwise. Yeah. Over to you, Mr. Sood. And we would love to see you on camera as well.
Good morning, Parvinder ji. Am I not on camera?
You're visible now. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Glad to hear that we are the first. And thank you to NIDM and WFP for initiative, which I think was long overdue for the country, because anyways, natural disasters frequency and severity is also increasing. Coming to your question, I'll answer it in three parts. First is, how can a private or social enterprise engage? And I'll share, because we kind of did this entire cycle last year when the pandemic hit. I think the first thing that private sector or the social impact entrepreneurs can do is provide a speed of innovation and problem solving, which may not always be available with anybody else who's working very deep in the humanitarian sector or in the social sector. So why do I say that, and how come we say that? Is we are essentially an ex-defense organization, pretty much made of ex-military and ex-efforts. So what we are building is based on best practices, which we have a commercial side to it, but the reason why we applied for the program was, what we were looking at was three things. One is speed of access to food and livelihood in the case of a disaster. Number two was the freedom of modularity in terms of how mobility and a platform of mobility can provide food and livelihood and probably shelter, to bring mobility as a concept into disaster management and disaster relief would help a lot. It already is an integral part, but before brick and mortar reconstruction begins, before fixed settlements get revived, it's very easy and very light to be able to deploy. And so we last year, when the pandemic hit and there was a lockdown, we very quickly worked with NGOs across Maharashtra, MP, Gujarat, Karnataka, to create a program called Jeevan Rath. So Jeevan Rath essentially was a hyper speeding up of our launch strategy as a company. What we did was, we provided food trucks to all the migrants who are walking back home. Then we were able to provide retail shops on trucks, which essentially were not selling anything. We were collecting money from corporates, providing free relief, whether it was medicines, whether it was menstruation kits, whether it was water, whether it was food, medicines, clothes for children, chappals, whatever was needed by migrants as they were walking back home. And it helped because the vehicles and the relief was traveling with them as they went towards home, or as they reached a point where they could get a public transport even to be able to reach home. And the program in its first month scaled to impact almost 2.5 lakh lives. Then UNICEF was involved, and we handed over the program to UNICEF to run. And now it runs under the umbrella of MahaPicoNet, and it has almost 17.5 lakh, about I think 20 lakh lives impacted at this point of time. And what ended up becoming was, mobility became the core for everything. So like, the engagement went from providing relief and respite, to then doing registration for vaccinations, to relief in terms of taking vehicles to ferry older people to come home. Right now, some of the partners are taking it a step forward, where they're taking vehicles with doctors and vaccine staff to people who are at home, who cannot come to a clinic or to a relief center to get a vaccination. So from our side, why we are very interested in the program is, one is the speed of what we bring. Could be a possible, like, it literally could be a few hours that you could deploy. Which is actually what we do, right? For the private sector, what we are providing is the ability to be where need is. Sometimes need can be for profit, sometimes need can be not for profit. It can be for relief, whether you are hungry, or relief if you are really without food. So from my perspective, what I feel is, we have learned a lot, because we're an ex-serviceman organization. So we bring a lot of ethos and systems and processes because essentially all army is built for is disaster management and crisis management, right? So the ethos are clear. Our vision is, we think, good, and we think what the for-profit sector or for the social impact entrepreneurship cohort or people who are sitting on the fence would benefit from the program is what we are also looking to, is to be able to see a totally new way of deploying something that you have built, provided of course it works, and to be able to bring solutions at a speed that sometimes may not be possible. Like as an organization, we have access to manufacturing for things where we are now also piloting. We have finished the design. We are piloting residential deployment system whereby you can create almost 40,000 square foot in almost 4 hours in terms of shelter, which is stable and can withstand winds, which are cyclone winds. So it's something that we as a company don't have any application for, but we've managed to see success with Jeevan Rath last year. Can we do something else and look at and deploy a solution which works? So I think innovation, speed of innovation is in a sense, I would boil it down to that. I think there are people who do much deeper work, much more wider work, much more touching work than people like me do. So we can do only one aspect, but we will, of course, be a smaller part in a larger cohort where everybody else is taking this forward and taking it to the ground and actually touching lives. So that's what I think our small role as social entrepreneurs or as a private enterprise could be.
Thank you, Mr. Sood, and that's partly the reason why your initiative is called Hungry Wheels, right? And taken from the Rath analogy. So it'll be fair to say that the private sector, which has, individuals, entrepreneurs, social startups, as they call themselves, have been responding to the space far more creatively at a smaller scale, and they're looking for partnerships and working with what you call the deep and more engaged stakeholders who are there. But it's not that this is not exciting enough for private sector to be in, right? So to your fellow applicants, your example would be that we're applying for this because we believe that the operationalization models and the learnings that we've created on the ground, the processes that we put in place, which can actually save lives by offering food and secure food safety for people, can also be something that can be replicated and taken elsewhere. And hence you're interested in this, and that's why they should also look at it. Thank you so much. And there might be a few interesting questions for you in the chat, so I'll come back to you. But thank you so much for a very focused response. And this takes me to our next panelist, Dr. Daniel Mahadzir. He's from UINSPIR Alliance, quite an evocative name, and so probably he could start by explaining to us why it's called that way. But my question to you, is more as a network, right? You're working with a large group of people, a set of people, individuals and organizations, I suppose, both as a member of the UINSPIR Alliance and as a potential applicant. I assume that you're still working on your application for MEGP. What are your thoughts on how, if such initiatives can play a role in strengthening the knowledge exchange at regional level, particularly Asia? And I can see a few very important questions that are already there in the chat, and we'll come back to that. Do you also see a potential in such initiative for catalyzing youth engagement, really, in bringing practice and policy reforms at regional level? So over to you, Daniel, and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for inviting me as one of the panel today. I'm very grateful to represent UINSPIR, it's not UINSPIR actually, UINSPIR Alliance for this amazing event. So for those who doesn't know who is UINSPIR Alliance, we are actually a group of youth and young professionals who's working on disaster risk reduction and also climate change across 12 countries in Asia Pacific. So since our inception, about 3 years ago, we have empowered youth and young professionals to participate in a global movement, voicing out their ideas, connecting with experts, gaining data and information, and finally contributing towards policy change. So there are many young people who is eager to channel their curiosity and passionate to contribute. Most of that comes in a ways that very unconventional. So the Alliance is positioning itself as an active network for collaboration where mutual learning is encouraged to address challenging local and transboundaries issues. We drive and derive solutions across all of our 12 chapters across this Asia Pacific. So how do we do that? We empower youth to lead and to break the silos. So the silos that youth experience nowadays are one of the most major factors that dilute all of our impact from their actions. And most of this action, even though it's interesting and highly potential, we have failed to scale up and result in any long-term changes. This is mainly because we have limited access to needed resources and also experts in the field. So UINSPIR come as an organization to break these vicious cycles by engaging youth and also a network of experts and promoting active learning between youth organizations under the UINSPIR Alliance. This learning was done through all of our events by highlighting the experts and also promoting dialogue between youth and experts. So next, why food? Why we want to work on food? Food has received a lot of blame for the climate change and the increasing disaster frequency. Our growing population and overconsumption pattern has also put a lot of pressure to the humankind to produce more food. So the importance of food, despite all of this, the importance of food doesn't really stop. We need to ensure population that's affected by disaster will continuously receive the needed nutrition to ensure their survival. The access to food is also another facet of resilience and preparedness that we need to discuss. We believe UINSPIR Alliance should be one of the platforms to raise this issue among youth and young professionals. Climate change is not a single out problem. It is a dynamic problem that affects all systems, including health system and food system. So with the amount of expertise that we house under UINSPIR Alliance, we want to initiate further dialogue and also knowledge transfer between youth organizations. Collectively, as an organization such as UINSPIR Alliance, we will have enough traction and power to bring the conversation to local policy level. And change at the policy level is one of the key things to ensure long-term impact. However, as youth and young professionals, this has been a huge, huge challenge for us. But we believe by breaking the silos, bridging the gap, connecting organizations can help us to participate in better, in change for the better. So in conclusion, there are three roles for UINSPIR to play as an organization. The first one, we want to connect youth and young professionals with experts in food system. And second one, we organize events to highlight food security best practices and also experts for youth to learn, optimize, and improvise. And finally, we want to support youth and their ideas by connecting them to relevant resources for them to scale up their idea, including to eventually change the policy. So again, thank you for having me here. Look forward to contribute more in this program.
Thank you, Daniel. And I just wanted to get a sense from Dr. Guleria. We have some questions, but I also have one concluding question for all the panelists. I mean, we can go around and we can hear each one of you. What would be the suggestion? I mean, should we go ahead with some of the questions that have come in from the participants, the potential applicants for you? So what do you suggest? I'll go with
Sure, Parvinder ji, because that's the whole idea for this, for this meet. So let's take up a couple of them. And maybe if there are few more, a lot of us would be happy to answer them separately also later on. That's also a possibility.
Sure. I think we'll take a couple and then we'll see how it goes. I think the first one really was by Kiki. So Kiki, would you like to ask? I'm unmuting you, and you can actually ask question yourself because I think it was quite detailed. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, and for all the panelists. So also, I'd like to thank you for the invitations from the NIDM and WFP. This is a very great opportunity to connect with other colleagues in the region, and this initiative is also very important. There are a few questions, as I also indicated in the chat, because we are the non-Indian applicant. I'm wondering how the process of linking to relevant government departments will be conducted, especially for the potential scale up maybe in the region. Will it be facilitated by the regional bureau of WFB Bangkok, or there are some other scheme? And the second question is, if I understand correctly from the flyer, the publication will be in regional conference in November. And I'm wondering if there is support for the publication beyond the regional conference, maybe mentorship for submission to an international journal or other process. And the last question is, if the initiative that we submit is already developed at preliminary stage with a department in Indonesia, a government department, should we submit it as a consortium or only UINSPIR Indonesia to apply? Maybe that's all, Mr. Singh. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiki. Well, you're joining us from London, if I'm not wrong. Great. So I think the question really is to you, Dr. Guleria. If you'd like to respond to some of it, and others, of course, as you pointed out, for more detailed one, we can connect bilaterally. But over to you if you'd like to respond.
Yes. So thank you for the question. Kiki ji, as regard the publication part, so we do have, we are looking at the whole idea of this compendium, and definitely as part of the mentorship, there shouldn't be much of an issue in, providing some insights into submission for other international journals. In fact, NIDM also runs we have our own in-house journal, which is titled as Disaster in Development. So that also provides an opportunity for a lot of international participants also to share their experiences. So I think this shouldn't be one of our concern directly. This can be handled. As regard to point number 3, it's purely your take on how you would like to apply, maybe as one consortium or separately. The idea is to that it should fall under the brackets of the 2 options that are being provided. So there is no rigidity as to the submission directly. What we are looking at is if the best possible the concerns or the contents are provided. So that also is not much of a concern for us. With respect to the point number 1, linking which otherwise is a concern, I do not know how WFP can facilitate or not, but NIDM, from a disaster management perspective, we also have our own networks across a lot of countries, and we closely work with both government and non-government departments and organizations for a lot of our efforts in training and capacity building initiatives, which is also one of the core essence of this particular project, which is capacity building for this particular sector, wherein we try to mainstream food and nutritional security into the subject of disaster management. So perhaps that linking can also be done. There can be specific programs conducted wherein relevant organizations can join hands in sharing their experiences and likewise. So I suppose if I've answered that, and if Animesh would like to add to any of the points.
So nothing further, Sushmaji, and yes, that is the idea. So, in fact, NIDM and WFP network, we will definitely reach out to various stakeholders to, see that how this matchmaking or the bridge platform can be useful both for the participants on one hand and also the relevant stakeholders who are working in the sector.
In fact, as part of phase 2, we would be trying to develop a pool of master resources, resource persons for this program. So maybe if we look at it beyond just the Indian scenario, so we can also try and look at some partnerships where capacity building or master trainer development for other countries can also be done. So that can be looked at it from that perspective. Also, we can look at it maybe a bit later though.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Guleria. Thanks, Animesh. There are a couple of questions which are more in terms of not the process of MEGP, but raising more substantial questions relating to monoculture, relating to women's participation in food systems and livelihoods. But these are conversations which are kind of discursive and would need more time. But I just thought maybe at least one of them really, which is by Mr. Saha, Pula Saha. Would you like to fill your question, or you want me to read out from the chat? But completely a choice. We would prefer to hear it from you. Mr. Saha, you there? So I take it that I can go ahead with your question, and I think it's more Dr. Guleria in space of how regionally different kinds of food systems, food practices, agricultural systems, and food security situations will feed into what MEGP initiative will do in future. So his question was, how will MEGP initiative protect the indigenous and multicultural cultivation styles in the Northeast? If you want to give a generic response, it'll be great.
Yeah. So, as a national institute with a broad mandate of and basic core mandate of training and capacity building, we look at a lot of concerns of states, and Northeast is definitely, one of our sensitive zones where there are multi-hazard concerns. So we look at it from that perspective, vulnerability assessments, and likewise, therein even this niche area of biodiversity conservation and maybe some indigenous local practices of agriculture practices, and likewise they are taken into consideration when we work in the training and capacity building areas. As part of this initiative, if we get some good examples, that is what we are wanting actually, because there is very less of, such examples which are actually working examples, and from the Northeast, even lesser. So if we get hold of some examples which suit similar situations to the Northeast regions also, we can always take it forward. We work very closely with all state disaster management authorities up to even the district levels in building their capacities. So if we get hold of some examples from the MEGP initiative, that can be shared with these states, or if we get examples or vice versa. So if we get examples from these states, as part of this initiative, that can be shared elsewhere also, wherever there are similar conditions and you have similar biodiversity zones, like the Andamans and Nicobars also have equal similar concerns when we look at it from hazards and subsequent disaster perspective. So
absolutely,
I've answered.
yeah. Thank you, Sushma ji. I think also partly emphasizing on the vulnerable and more exposed geographies and communities. There was one question from Tamanna Kumar, Tanmay Kumar Jinnah. Sorry, the screen is really small. So Tanmay, would you like to ask your question? It's a very specific question, and I think it kind of builds into what Sushma ji said just now. But over to you, if you would like to read out your question to the panel. In
fact, Tanmay ji, this is a subject which is otherwise also very close to people working in our field, especially. We have a complete sustainable development goal, specifically targeting this agenda of women equality, women empowerment, because we do feel that gap, and there are ample examples from different regions across. At least I can talk from an Indian perspective, where women still have, the concerns of their taking care of their very, very basic essentials, like even, getting water for the daily needs. They have to fetch it from very far off places, and likewise. In context to climate change and then the gender concerns, their needs totally differ, not just in the pre-scenarios, but also in the post-scenarios. And we work specifically on subjects which are oriented around women needs. So by and large, we look at gender as a subject, but then that encompasses both male and female needs and requirements in disaster management. But even from how women can be made more self-sufficient, how their SHGs are doing extremely well post-disasters. In a lot of disasters, post-disasters, there are ample examples where a lot of SHGs evolve, and it's mostly the informal, the women groups that sustain very long term. as compared to male SHG groups, wherein because the reasons could be that they go back to their prior jobs and likewise issues. So these are some very good examples. There are very localized examples of how these women groups work in disaster scenarios. And also, you have specifically mentioned from an agriculture perspective, yes, the informal sector comprises largely of women folks, if I'm not wrong. And even the pandemic has given us a lot of examples of how this sector, the women sector, informal sector, especially the garment sector, the migrant, the farm laborers, which also comprise of women. So their concerns need to be addressed. Reverse migration is one challenge that we have just noticed more so in the pandemic, and how men folk, when they're going back to their hometowns, they're taking up all these small jobs which otherwise were handled by the women folks because they were unskilled, a lot of times the unskilled components. We work on these issues and areas, but purely from a disaster management perspective only, and we do integrate some of these measures in the state initiatives as well. So these are issues which are taken care of, but you may not see a lot of examples very vividly otherwise, but at the local levels, state specific, there are some good case studies that have given positive results also, purely from a disaster management perspective. Yeah.
Thank you, Sushma ji. I think that was quite comprehensive. And one of the ways to look at most of these questions is build it to them as an opportunity to really kind of find somebody who can work on the solutions and scale it up. And as you rightly said, there are examples, there are stories of change and evidences on the ground. So it's just a matter of, bringing them up and providing an enabling environment. That's what exactly this challenge seeks to do. Now, we have a few more questions, but I think I will move to a general question to all the panelists. And because, Dr. Guleria is from NIDM, I would want you to respond to it last, but in the order that we really went through. My question to, the kind of at a broader level is to all the panelists, starting with Daniel, what would be your word of advice, as practitioners, considering the participation in MEGP initiative, and which basically means that if you were advising people who are working on the ground, who have such solutions and ideas, what would be your direct advice to them, by the way of inspiring them to apply? So Daniel, you first.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I guess one of the problem with the solution has always been about the design. So when we design a solution, has forget the aspect of human-centered design. So when we design a solution, it always comes to a level of something that is not adoptable, something that is not long-term, something that is very superficial or on the surface. So that's why in the UINSPIR, as one of my colleagues Kiki mentioned just now, we're trying to actually connect all the relevant stakeholders, trying to work on solution that is ground up, so that this solution is more holistic and address all the facets of the environment, all the facets of the problem itself, and then ensure that food is delivered despite being in disaster or not being in disaster. So that's my only advice or takeaway from this.
Very important. I think, very important. And just going in that order, Mr. Sood, what would be your, last pitch on this?
From my own learning, and given I have consulted the NGO sector for a very long while, I think anybody who's a social entrepreneur or looking to work or engage with the sector, one is I agree that there needs to be a very humane approach to the design of solutions. It has to be designed for extremes. That's the first thing. Second is from a modeling perspective, we anyway follow it as a company, but that's, I think, just us. You have to find a not for greed model that operates in this environment. Essentially, I mean, being an entrepreneur in an enterprise, you can't be a not for profit, but you can have a not for greed model where you can cap it and ensure that you can spread the project to grow. The third thing is, I think there is need for resilience to test models. I think given the private sector is used to hire, fire, speed of whatever else we are used to, Sometimes you can end up getting frustrated, but the thing is that in an environment which requires a solid solution that can scale and has multiple stakeholders and has different implementation partners and the complexities of what comes with what NIDM is working into and around, there needs to be resilience to be able to see if your model actually works, if your assumptions are good for board level or computer level or keyboard level or on ground and across 2 states and 30 states and 5 countries and 20 countries. So that understanding, that ability to model at that complexity and the resilience to be able to stick is something that I think a lot of people lack. And that would help everybody. I mean, if there's a engagement that you want to have with the enterprise sector coming into the social impact for the social sector, the enterprise side needs to understand this because the social sector is anyway doing what it is doing very well.
Exactly.
If you want to come into and play a role, you have to understand that it's grounded work. It's not board level work. So I think my 3 bits would be design, not for greed model, and resilience of sticking with a model to see if the assumptions work.
Right, something that balances profit, people, and the sustainability part.
Yeah,
fantastic. And so I can take it from you that you will be having this conversation with some of your fellow entrepreneurs and in the private sector as well. I mean, the deadline is close by, but do have a conversation with them with your example. Thank you so much.
I already started having with a couple of people who are doing soilless farming, who can do quick food regeneration in the case of a disaster. Very research-oriented people, so difficult to get them to come into part of a program. But I'm still talking. I have a meeting today evening at 5:30. I shall be talking.
Wonderful. All the best with that conversation. I can clearly see you're inspired, and we hope more applications will come from the private sector and entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
And over to Ms. Shivani. Your concluding remarks. Just in terms of what would be your advice to the practitioners in participating in the initiative.
Yeah, I think the only advice I would right now look into is the DRR perspective. As I already mentioned in my while I was speaking earlier, is really into see what level of assessments we can put into, which will really help organizations to prepare, and also not only organizations but as well as communities to be more prepared during the emergencies, and we somehow reduce the sufferings of the community. So that's something is I would say is we really need to focus upon in the entire initiative. I think after you receive all the good example, good case stories and the reports that through this process, maybe the further step will be to channelize that how we can actually now look into providing a benefit to the larger section of societies who are right now responding to the communities and who are helping communities to cope with such emergencies from the food and nutrition perspective. So that's something one of the area I would really emphasize to look into. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shivani ji. And now over to you, Mr. Prasad. I sense that when you were speaking in the first kind of round, you covered it quite well and you emphasized on it. But just as a kind of a last pitch, telling practitioners of why they need to be associated with this, and despite all the kind of challenges there may be in terms of understanding and applying, but what would it be that you'd like to say to them? Yeah.
My point here is that, this is an opportunity. I mean, I remember when I started work in Bihar in 2005, there was hardly a platform where we could come and share our thoughts. And they were very limited. I wouldn't say there weren't any, but they were very limited. And this is an opportunity which actually we should do away with our inhibitions, and we should attempt to write about what we have been doing, because the people who are actually working are the best people to write. I mean, this is something which we need to really understand and internalize. External people coming and documenting is very different than what people who have actually done. And that is why it takes a lot of time and people are hesitant to get into this kind of work. But I would say if you have done the work, it is time for the world to know as to what you have done. Otherwise, it will be extremely difficult for anyone to come and do this particular needful. So for all people who are planning, all the participants who are planning to do the pitch, please go ahead. Don't think of consequences. Just see the process in which you're putting your work or your group's work in the public domain. You're sharing it with people, and you never know how it is going to impact later. So that's that bit of it. Thank you.
So very, very well articulated. And, the last point that you said makes a lot of sense. A lot of these applications, a lot of these ideas, conversation starters, and regardless of the consequences of how they move through the process, you are also able to put them together. And I think it's one of the aspirations, if I can speak on behalf of Dr. Guleria and Animesh, that there is a plan to put all of it together, revisit them, and bring it out like compendium. And that's something that will be shared much more widely. So your solution, your questions, your own individual struggle or journey becomes a source of inspiration and information for a lot wider audience and stakeholders. So that's great. And I think that broadly brings to the last stakeholder here, Dr. Guleria, over to you. And I think after that, we will wind up this very, very exciting conversation.
Thank you so much. Harping upon that need to document, good practices. We look at a lot of concerns in silos. Like I was, how Shivangi ji, she's been reiterating about the need for early warning systems. Her concern is directly related to food and nutrition. Although you do have early warning systems, nowcast, forecast for a lot of related concerns. But then these are all things which are practiced maybe, in silos. And that's why an attempt to, document these events, bring everything and as a compendium on one platform, and then share this whole knowledge with various stakeholders. And that's the idea. We do have a platform as a national level institute wherein we do work very closely with a lot of national and international stakeholders, and on a lot of different areas and sectors where definitely this particular concern of food and nutrition can be very beautifully integrated, especially in our field. So this is a platform where let's all just come together, share our experiences, and then have a mutual sharing of these learnings with a lot of other groups and stakeholders.
Sure.
So maybe that's the intent of this particular initiative itself. Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Guleria. And I think this brings us to the end of the current conversation. There's very kind of interesting thing about practitioners. They're very resilient. So I can share with you, and you would have noticed as well, we've had a very steady audience. Though we didn't have a lot of people in the room, I think we had hardly anyone dropping out, which means that this business of being practitioner and trying to challenge imagination also creates its own kind of resilience. So here is to resilient spirit of innovation, problem solving, working together, and hopefully taking some really, really good ideas and practices to scale. I thank all the panelists who were here to have the conversation and the questions that were asked. So we'll be curating those questions. We'll get back to you for the ones which we haven't answered. But please go out there, talk to people. 31st of August is the last date. But this initiative is going to be up for a while. And, your contribution and association on this would be really, really useful. So thank you, everyone, and stay safe and all the best in your individual journeys. Thank you.
Thank you, Parvinder.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon. Be safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll stay on till everybody logs off, just in case.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, Parvinder ji. Go and have lunch.
Bye, Anthony.